Hey guys, I'm the 50s kid. This is my E46, and this is the engine support bar that you saw in the oil pan gasket change video. And you might be asking yourself, why is it still here? Well, funny story. The E53, the X5 that I usually do videos on, it was actually over here to get its brakes done. And the owner couldn't stick around while I was doing that, so he took my E46 and he kept it overnight. So the next day the brakes are done, he calls me up. He had gone to do an errand before he brought it back over. He had to pull off the freeway. He said he saw smoke coming out the back, and when he pulled over, there's oil pouring out the engine, pouring down on the ground. So I'm like, ah, God, my bad. That's the second time I've done something to a BMW that he's been driving while something has gone catastrophic and he's had to pull off of a freeway. Anyway, so I went to U-Haul, I got a trailer, we towed it back here, which is kind of funny, you know, a BMW towing a BMW, it's not something you see every day. But anyway, brought it back here, I've got it up, and I'm doing everything I did in the oil pan gasket change video. I'm about to find out what exactly is going on. The oil seems to be coming from the very rear of the oil pan, right where it joins the transmission. So I'm thinking maybe perhaps it's the RTV, the lines of RTV that you put on the back where the engine joins the transmission. But I don't know yet. Maybe it's the main seal that blew out, and it's not. It has nothing to do with the oil pan, but I doubt it. Anyway, this time around, now that I've done this this whole job again, I've noticed a couple of things that I wish I had put in the previous video. Just kind of some tips on how to do it easier. So I'm going to take you through those things and show you some things in this video. So it's not going to be a whole video on doing the whole oil pan gasket again. It's just kind of an addendum to that video, and I will probably link to this video from that one and such. But anyway, let me show you what we've got here. One of the things I told you to do in the last video was the power steering pump right here. I told you to take this and just wire it up out of the way. That's what the Bentley manual says. But don't do that. Just pull the thing out of here, okay? And just move it and rest it on top of the subframe that's hanging down, okay? That way it's totally out of the way. And look at that, you got so much more room. You got room to see everything. If I'd only done this in the first place or in the first video, I would have been able to film getting all these bolts off, because now it's certainly a lot easier to see. As you can see, we got that there. You can see all the bolts on that end. You can see there. It's really just the power steering or the ATF lines that are in the way, really. But it's not too big a deal. So that's tip number one. Tip number two is you want to use your jack to lower the subframe right here, like I did in the first video. You don't need a piece of wood, by the way. It's too unruly to do that. Use your jack to lower this thing, but once it's lowered, you can take your jack away. I know you can still see it behind there, but it's not holding up the subframe right now. The subframe is just holding itself up by the lower control arms and such. So go ahead and do that right there, and then you want to use your jack. You can see where my jack's positioned right here. My jack is holding up the oil pan. That's so that the oil pan doesn't drop when I pull all the bolts out. I've pulled all but one bolt at this point. So you want to use your jack to do that, and you especially want to use your jack when you're reinstalling the oil pan. I just wish I had done that, because it would have made everything so much easier. And in fact, that kind of brings me to the reason I think the accident happened. I think that perhaps one of those beads of silicone or of RTV that I ran on either end probably got a little mushed around when I put the oil pan back up and must have failed. But anyway, we're going to find out together here. One of the things I said to do at the end of the first video was, if you have an automatic transmission and you have these ATF cooler lines, there's a bracket that I remove in the front, but the Bentley manual tells you there's a bracket you can remove in the back in order to kind of pull these away from the engine. Don't remove that bracket. I told you to do in the last video, but I figured out this time that if you pull that bracket off, these ATF lines will come out of the transmission completely and you'll drip oil on the floor. So rather than deal with that whole mess, just leave the rear bracket on and just, pull the forward lines and wire them back like I said. Much easier. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the pan down, and I thought I'd give you a wider view this time. Sort of drop my jack a little. So the difficulty in this has just always been getting the pan to clear the chain right up here. We can see that. That's always what the difficulty has been in getting this pan on and off. You just got to get it to clear that chain. So once that's done, a lot easier. Here you can see where my lines of RTV were on the front. Those look okay. Well, you can see a bead of oil around the outside here, but that's not really conclusive evidence of anything. I mean, it doesn't mean that the gasket was leaking. It just means that, you know, the oil got a little smeared as I was taking the pan off and just kind of saturated the whole area once there was a little bit of an opening. So that's really not much to go on. You can see where the RTV was smushed a little bit, but let's take a look at the engine now. So here's a close-up of the rear of the engine. Two surfaces. You know, they don't look wrong. I see RTV there. I mean, I believe that it was sealing. So I can't really see evidence right here that would tell me that this is the source of the oil leak. In fact, I'm just kind of, I'm even more perplexed here. I'm kind of wondering if it was in fact the rear main seal that's back up in there. In order to get at that, I would actually have to take the transmission off, which is, you know, itself a whole different video. So I'm probably thinking that I'm going to clean this area up and redo it and then just start the engine, run the engine as it is. Not put the subframe back up or any of that stuff, and see if it's still leaking. Because, you know, if the rear main seal is blown out, it would still leak. If it was this, it will then not leak. So that's my plan. I'm going to do that, not filming any of it, just come back with the conclusion. Well, guys, I turned the thing on and let it run for about 20 minutes, and that leak that you see right there never stopped happening. Just kept drip, 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 dripping. So I have to conclude that this is the rear main seal. I just went ahead and put the subframe back up just to kind of get it out of the way while I work under the car from here on out. But yeah, it has to be the rear main seal. That's the only other thing that could be leaking right there. Bummer. I'll do that in another video though. Well, I guess it's definitely not the oil pan gasket. It's got to be the rear main seal. I mean, that's the only other thing right there that could be leaking like that. So it's definitely not transmission fluid. It is oil, engine oil. So yeah, that's a big bummer. I'll have to work on that. I'm going to put that in another video because it's a pretty big job. It involves removing the exhaust, removing the drive shaft, removing the transmission. Hopefully I can just slide that back. You know, I don't know if there's room to do that. I think there might be. And then I'll be able to get access to the rear main seal. Yeah, I think I'm going to remove all those things first before I order a part. That way I can just be sure. But it probably is that. Anyway, going back over the tips that I gave you in this video, the only thing I want to add is when you pull the jack away from the lower subframe after you've lowered it, put a block of wood under it just to make sure, because it is mainly hanging by the lower control arms, but it's also hanging by one of the power steering hoses. There was a little bit of torque on that, so I just want to make sure that nothing gets damaged, you know, so just put a block of wood underneath it and you'll be good to go. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys.